Chapter 20. Wilks opened his door to an exhausted-looking Ripley. "I know it's late, but can I talk to you for a minute?" "Yeah, sure. How are you feeling? We thought—" He trailed off as she brushed past him and sat on the edge of his bed, head down. She ran her hands through her mussed hair. Her shoulders were tense, and there were dark smears beneath her eyes. Her face was ashen. She looked up at Wilks with an expression he couldn't quite place, something like fear, shame. "What's going on, Ripley?" "I know that no one is officially in charge of this thing, but everyone has looked to me this far," she said. She seemed to stare through him, as if she were reciting to a wall. "That's right," he said carefully, "and you've done a good job." "Well, I quit. It's yours, Wilks. I want you to finish it." She stood up as if the conversation was finished and stepped towards the door. "Hold on a second, Ripley. What's going on here? You just got out of medical, you look like hell, and now you want to drop responsibility for our little stowaway on me? How hard did you get knocked on the skull?" He grinned to lighten the tone, but he was surprised. "It's not open to discussion, Wilks. Look, if you don't want to do it, talk to McQuaid, or Moto, or anyone. I don't care, but I'm out." Her cheeks were flushed, but Wilks still couldn't pin down the emotion. "Why?" he said. "Can you tell me that? What happened?" Ripley dropped her gaze and seemed to shrink. She didn't say anything, but she didn't move to leave either. Wilks waited, confused. Since day one, this had been Ripley's baby. She'd brought the Queen on board single-handedly, and, if it hadn't been for her, he and Billie and Falk would be atomic dust, if the aliens hadn't gotten to them first. "I just had a long conversation with Jones," she said finally. Her voice was slow and measured, and she wouldn't meet his eyes. "I'm a synthetic, Wilks. Fake." She crossed her arms and looked at him, face blank. "I'm not human, and I didn't even know it." Wilks looked at her for a few beats as it sank in. An android. He took a deep breath. "Are you sure?" "Jones showed me the blood samples. We ran through the tests. Yeah, I'm sure." She pressed the heel of her hand to her forehead, eyes closed. "Not to make light of it, Ripley, but so fucking what? You've gotten us this far and don't you get it?" Her voice was high and shaky. "Who knows what my agenda is? I may have been programmed with this idea by some company that wants a specimen to study. What if I'm set up to kill all of you when we get to Earth?" She lowered her voice. "I'm not trustworthy. Can you, access your program?" "No. Apparently I'm too advanced. No mechanicals, no input or export jacks." Her voice was charged with bitter self-disgust. "Jones said he would have never known without a microscan. I can pass for human right down to the microscopic level." Wilks frowned. "I see your point," he said. "But no shit, I don't think it makes a difference. You could have left us to die back there. You could have killed us already. And who's left on Earth to study anything?" He paused for a moment. "I think wherever your agenda came from, it's a good one. And if the only way to tell is with a microscan, what's the difference?" Ripley walked to the door and pushed it open. "The difference is me. she said. She stepped into the corridor. Wilks looked at the half-open door. Jesus and Buddha. How would everybody else take this? Finding out that what they thought was human. Billie, he thought. Ripley obviously wasn't dealing too well with this. Maybe Billie would have something to say about it. She had loved Beulah, even after she found out the truth. Wilks went to find her. Billie knocked at Ripley's door and waited. There was no response. The Kurtz's heat had cycled down for the standard night. Billie folded her arms tightly against the chilly air. She knocked again, softer this time. Maybe she's asleep, she thought. Good. She waited another moment and then walked back to her quarters. Wilks stood up when she stepped into her room. She's asleep, said Billie. Or just not answering, he said. Maybe you can talk to her tomorrow. There didn't seem to be much else to say. He left, went back to his own cubicle. Billie went to hers. Billie was tired, but there was too much going on to think about sleeping yet. She sat down on the edge of her bed. What would she have said to Ripley? What could she say? Oh, sorry, Ripley, that's tough. You know, I was in love with a soldier once, and it turned out he wasn't real either. I was hurt when I found out. I guess I felt betrayed. That wouldn't be very helpful. Billie exhaled slowly and lay back. She stared at the ceiling and tried to spot flaws in the smooth plastic paneling as her mind wandered. Mitch had been capable of love. She believed that now. But by the time she had realized it, she and Wilks had been on Spears' ship already. Did knowing about Ripley change anything? Billie thought about the mission so far. From the start, Ripley had been totally committed to destroying the creatures. No, her respect for Ripley was solid. Since Billie had known her, Ripley hadn't seemed to need anyone, but it sounded like she could use some support now. In a way, she suddenly seemed more real, more human, she thought. The way Mitch had been in that final transmission. Billie knew all about the prejudices that people still held about synthetics. It was hard for some to talk to machines and feel comfortable. Was Mitch just a machine? Is Ripley? After Mitch, she'd had a different perspective on things, and this was about perspective. Ripley wasn't born in the usual way, but did that make her soulless, or any less valuable as a being? Where could you draw the line? Finally, Billie slept. She dreamed of questions with no answers. Ripley finally acknowledged her hunger when it became apparent that it wasn't going to go away. Fine, she thought. I'm hungry. Big deal. It was late morning. She had slept for almost 10 hours and had awakened still tired. She lay in bed, eyes closed. It was all she could think about, and yet there was nothing to think. How could she feel? And what did it matter? Her feelings were simulated, false. At least some things were clearer now. Her lapse of time after the Sulaco, the absence of dreams since then, and the intense distrust of doctors. Obviously a programmed measure to avoid the truth. Can't let them go poking around in you. They'll figure it out. The why was elusive, and maybe it was pointless besides. All of her beliefs were in question. Androids were not to be trusted. They could betray themselves completely. It was their nature. The way she had been betrayed. The synthetic on the Nostromo had been a murderer who had posed as a friend. Bishop had been okay, but... Ripley frowned. There had even been something about Bishop that was all wrong, some duality, although she couldn't quite remember. There was a knock at the door. "Ripley, it's Billie. Can I come in?" Ripley's heart tightened. Billie. The young woman had shown a lot of courage through all of this. Ripley had been proud of her. Funny, she thought. How human of me. "Not now, Billie. It'll only take a minute. Wilks wants to go into deep sleep tonight and... Go away, Billie. I don't want company." The mere thought of talking about it made Ripley more exhausted. There was a hesitation. Ripley imagined Billie standing there, searching for magic words. "Nobody cares," she would say. "Really, it's okay." The idea of Billie pitying her made her feel sick, and the feeling wasn't even real. Damn. "Not now!" She heard Billie walk away. She was glad to hear that the others were going into deep sleep. She wanted to be left alone. Ripley's stomach growled noisily. She pulled her knees to her chest and willed it all to go away.